And we have lots of labor people here.
Okay, still good morning. It is April 11th. No, it's April 12th. My daughter's birthday is tomorrow. It is April 12th. In Senate Economic Development Council and General Affairs. We are in on H55, and I'm sorry we're late.
There's too much happening.
Yeah, there is too much happening.
So please have patience.
So one change to the agenda, I think people have in front of them is the VSEA has asked us to consider a very small piece of language that did pass out of the House in H560. It's passed the House. I mean, it has to. Right?
Well, sort of. It passed out of House General. Got stuck in House Appropriations.
Oh, so it's not on our wall.
No.
Got it. Okay, for some reason I thought I left it behind it. It's on our wall. Okay, so we're gonna consider that, but first we're gonna start with Damien and everything that he has been asked to draft.
Yeah, H560 or
PTSD.
It's 240. It's section 247. Yeah. Okay. That is it's not H560, but
Okay.
yeah. I was just, that one's rulemaking for workers' comp, right? But I know which one you're talking about. Hooker.
Yeah, but no, it has.
All right. So given the number of witnesses you have and our time constraints this morning, should I be at about 100,000 feet? Or how would you like to go through
As
this?
long as we're not like falling toward the ground, but yeah, but good show.
Space
Yeah.
shuttle. We should
Don't
modernize
even
that.
go there.
Yeah.
You know what, that's, yeah,
Anyway.
sorry.
Dream Chaser. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's like Space Shuttle, but it's way cooler in 21st century.
Is it a movie or a space shuttle?
It is a private effort for an immortal vehicle.
Okay.
So anyway, that's my nerd moment for the
I'm
moment.
gonna picture that right now.
So I'm going to go through this pretty high level. I've provided the committee members with a side-by-side.
Yes.
You have two unemployment insurance compensation overpayment waiver provisions in here. They are similar but different. One is the proposal from Vermont DOL, which was in Representative Marcotte's bill in the House. The other is a modified version of the proposal that Representative Bloomley introduced on behalf of Vermont Legal Aid.
Mhm.
And the modifications are from Vermont Legal Aid. You will see those highlighted in yellow on your latest draft. They're not highlighted in yellow on the side-by-side because I didn't want to confuse things there. But the side-by-side is so you can actually see the language because it's dealing with the same issue, just dealing with it slightly differently.
We're back to pandemic overpayments. Yeah.
We're back to the issue of overpayments that we started discussing in the pandemic. But this is not PUA. This is regular unemployment insurance.
And in the latest draft that you've done, I asked you to use Vermont Legal Aids.
Yes, and that is in the latest draft. And their changes are shown in yellow.
We have the actual.
So
there it is.
if you look on the, in your bill, I'll just walk you through what you have in front of you. So section, I don't have section numbers. So page 1, this is employers' experience rating records. It's asking to extend the amount of weeks that we forgive employers for the charges against their experience rating following a disaster from 4 to 10.
Mhm.
So this is follow up to some of the disasters we've had in recent years.
For the employers.
This is for the employers. So basically, as an employer, if your employees are out of work because your store was flooded and they can't come to work, you're avoiding experience rating charges. Right now, it's for 4 weeks. This would extend it to 10 weeks.
So can you remind me where this proposal came from to 10?
This is from Vermont DOL.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So we,
But that protects our businesses. I mean, otherwise they're employer rating tanks if they're done.
I'm not, I think it's a good thing. I don't know if it's enough weeks. We can hear from Dirk about how they laid it on 10 weeks. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are still recovering. So, I just.
Yeah. So it would
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
socialize those costs throughout the system
Mhm,
when you have some businesses that are hit by natural disaster.
right,
In the next section that starts on page 2, and goes to the top of page 4, that is DOL's proposal for,
Okay.
waiver of overpayments. And then starting on page 4, and going to page 7, is legal aid's proposal on the waiver of overpayments. You're going to see that, there are 2 additional sections, highlighted in yellow on page 7. The reason for these sections, one is, delayed effective date, because the current, system cannot handle a partial waiver. And so this would delay the effective date of limiting the amount of benefits that can be withheld from an individual's, UI compensation check, the
mhm,
50%, until we have, an IT system that can handle that.
And we think that'll be there by November 1st this year.
No, so that is the top of the page, from lines 1 to line 7. And that effective date is a contingent effective date that's set at the end of the bill.
We have a
Starting,
maximum, like, no more than 10 years.
yeah, it's by, 2026, I believe.
Okay.
And you can see the actual date at the end.
and so just so everybody knows, because Cameron is away and we're doing this quickly, but hopefully intentionally, I just asked DOL for their changes to be incorporated with them, and we have Dirk here, so. I
Okay,
just want people to know where this all came from.
well, this is from legal aid.
Oh, this is from legal aid.
This is the legal aid
Legal
proposal
aid
Oh,
language started.
on page 4 and goes to
Oh,
page
sorry,
7.
I'm on page 7.
Yeah,
that's all
which is legal aid. Yeah, so.
Okay,
Sorry,
I'm looking at. the
Vermont
piece that
DOL
was
is pages
with-
1 to 4,
Okay,
legal aid is pages 4 to 7.
okay,
And so this would cap the amount of benefits that can be withheld.
so
And
before it
it's-
was, they could withhold 100%.
Right now, they
Capped it
withhold
at 50.
100%.
I was wondering how this would come from legally, now I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it would cap
So it's a, yeah,
what? It would say.
It would cap the amount of benefits you withhold each week to repay an overpayment at 50%.
okay,
But it's contingent on the implementation of the new IT system. So that they have a computer system that can handle that. And then the next section, and this is what you were reading a moment ago, Senator Clarkson, from lines 9 to 13 on page 7, is requiring rulemaking to implement the provisions relating to the waiver of overpayments. To begin that rulemaking on or before November 1st. And this is the filing of the proposed rule stage, so not just starting to come up with the proposed rule, but you have a proposed rule that is filed with the Secretary of State to start the clock running on the process of going through LCAR, public hearings, et cetera. And then starting on line 14 of page 7, we are shifting gears to UI fraud prevention. And this is from Senator Brock's bill. The first provision in here takes someone who intentionally makes a fraudulent statement or representation to obtain, increase, or initiate a benefit. It updates the penalties there. So they're liable to repay the overpaid benefit. They can have an administrative penalty of up to $5,000. They would be ineligible to receive benefits for 5 years from the date of the fraudulent statement. And then they would have regular right to appeal. And it would also allow the commissioner to collect that administrative penalty in Superior Court. So that's part 1 of it. And then part 2 goes to the overpayment language. So if you can.
Unknown next section.
That is, yes, so the section numbers here are left blank because we have so many different provisions relating to the same sections. So what you're gonna see when you choose which sections you want to go with or which pieces is I'm going to combine several of these sections into one section. So that things that take effect on the same date are shown in the same section. But I can't do that until I know what you want to do. So, so this next piece here would get back to section 1347, which relates to some of the overpayment provisions. Oh, actually, it doesn't. I'm sorry, but it would go to the non-disclosure and misrepresentation section in here. And it would update that section to reference the penalty provision that was just updated. And clarify that the commissioner shall prosecute under that penalty provision.
Shall not may.
Shall not may. So currently it allows the, it basically says when the commissioner finds that someone made a fraudulent statement in their claim for benefits and did not prosecute the person under section 1368, and they didn't apply the penalty in 1373, the person would be disqualified from benefits until the overpayment is repaid. And that's generally what happens. And this is instead saying, no, the commissioner shall prosecute under 1368 for the fraudulent statement. And the way the new 1368 is, it requires repayment and it imposes a penalty and a 5-year disqualification.
Okay, really quickly, I'm looking around the room. Is anyone here from the treasurer's office, by any chance? Okay, well, will you email the treasurer's office and just say this is the time we're looking at the baby bond trust?
Yep, and I do have an email from the treasurer's office,
Okay.
From Justin St. James, the general counsel, saying that they are okay with the language.
Oh, good.
And also the treasurer emailed last night to say that he was okay with it pending review by his staff, so.
Okay.
But I don't have any more testimony from them.
Right.
They're just okay with.
Just tell them they might want someone in the room in case they ask questions. Yeah.
So this is an issue that Randy's been cared a lot about. This is what he did professionally for a long time. Fraud. I guess my concern here is that we still allow people. Yeah, I know.
Really?
But my concern here is that we still are able to let people who make mistakes and are not fraudulent have time to cure that with the department, because there are people, it's complicated and sometimes people make mistakes, as we have discovered.
So what I would say with all of this is probably something where you want to focus on it for a period of testimony and discussing your options. And this interweaves with the overpayment waiver, and you're going to want to make sure that if you're doing fraud enforcement and overpayment waiver, or whatever you do on these pieces, that you weave them all together. Because they push on a lot of the same
Yeah,
areas, and you just want to make sure you don't have a potential conflict in there. And you also want to be clear about what it is that you as a committee decide you're going to move out of the room.
right.
That said, I think that's, I'll leave it there. So that these first 8-9 pages all weave together and probably need their own set of attention here, between fraud and overpayment waivers, if you're going to move any or all of the different proposals in some form.
What I don't see in this, as far as the fraud, is any criminal penalty, is there, in that here, is that in here?
I don't think that was in your bill.
Yeah.
So I think I was told to incorporate the bill. Let me just pull that up. There used to be a criminal penalty, but it was never used.
Yeah.
Um,
Then we abolish it altogether.
I think we have abolished it altogether because it was unused, I think, ever. Was the testimony we received, was that no one had a record of it ever being enforced. But I can find out about this. So this is an administrative penalty with a civil collection mechanism. And a 5-year disqualification.
Right.
If I
Civil,
go to,
yeah.
yeah, if I look back at frauds. We still have workers' compensation fraud on the books. I don't see unemployment insurance fraud, but I would have to look.
There is a penalty now, I understand that that you abolished that some years ago. I was concerned that
So, but yes, there is a workers' comp fraud penalty, which is also, as I understand it, not frequently used. But it involves fines of up to $100,000 in prison for up to 3 years. Depending on the scale of the penalty.
That's what.
That's for workers' compensation.
And that's criminal. 3 years.
Yes, no, that, I was saying there is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
criminal penalty for workers' comp fraud that's on books. So that I think in the past, we have discussed the unemployment comp, criminal penalty, but it is not currently on the books.
I think during COVID, we may have seen, right now, it's, it's generally an individual. But since apparently I applied and was denied my 6 weeks of work at the Alaskan Fish Hatchery, somebody
You were having
applied
fun.
for me.
there was a substantial increase
Yes.
of fraudulent activity during COVID to the point that some systems were shut down or done manually as a result. And it was quite significant,
Yeah, it was much more organized.
which was always, again, one of the major concerns. We don't have an effective criminal penalty at all.
Well, I'm not sure it's a deterrent either. I mean, if it sounds like we have it for workers' comp, but it is.
Yeah, I have to defer to the department to speak about,
We'll ask her.
about criminal enforcement and. I think some states do have the penalty, but the department would definitely have a better sense of how effective that's been. And the, resources needed to actually prosecute it.
Okay,
Asks of that, type the paragraph, free money.
okay, we have 25.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Sorry.
technical corrections for unemployment insurance begin on, page 9. And they go on to page the page 15, the very top of page 15. There is a note with the very last one that if Senator Brock's UI fraud proposal is incorporated into the final bill, that last technical correction section should be combined with it. A lot of these are just correcting terminology and making things consistent. And these were things that didn't make it in the technical corrections bill just because I sent so much material over to the department and they were so strapped for time that they could not get back to us in time to get it into the technical corrections bill. So
So we're doing it here as opposed to punting it to next year's.
right. And this will allow us, because we are republishing Title 21 this year, to not put in a
yes.
giant supplement.
Good.
So you're saving resources.
We
Uh,
should, yeah, I think
so-
we should just. Maybe
Okay.
jump to firefight, I don't,
Yeah.
just,
No
Yeah.
problem.
yeah,
So
Workers' comp.
So I would note the state employees PTSD is incorporated into the bill. So that is in your next section,
okay.
section 601.
601, sorry, is that workers' comp? Top
That is workers'
14?
comp, so
I think we have blanks for the sections right now.
Right, but
Yes.
it's on page 15.
it's on
Yeah.
page 15,
Line
line 11.
Mm-hmm,
It starts there, and that
Okay,
starts
well.
your state employees. So this would provide coverage for state employees with PTSD under workers' comp, and it would provide them with presumption that it was work-related unless the state proved otherwise.
And
That's
this
the key
is
change.
corrections workers dispatch. This is a lot of,
Yep, the list of state employees
Mhm.
covered starts on page 17, line 9. And so I'll leave it there and
Yeah.
keep skipping ahead to fire departments, starting on page 18, line 6. The first section here requires the executive director of Division of Fire Safety to survey municipal and private volunteer fire departments regarding some basic demographic information. How many firefighters? What are the ages? How many of them use tobacco? And then annual salary and wages, including for volunteers, their annual earnings in their regular employment. And it would require that information anonymously. So we're not providing personal information, but we're getting a snapshot of what are the costs, how many firefighters are we talking
Yeah,
about?
which is data we did not have, as we discussed.
Yeah,
And we don't have that now.
Yeah.
yeah. And so this would require a report by December 15th. You'll want to hear from Division of Fire Safety about whether they have the resources to do that in that time
Okay.
window.
Can you put
Mike DeRocher.
brochure on the list for his bill?
I'm here on his behalf today.
Oh, you are? Okay, I'm not,
It was in
right,
there,
I don't
but-
have my glasses.
What's your
on.
name?
Michael Skaz. Michael Skaz.
Do
Oh,
you,
He's on the.
Yeah. okay, do you, you're on the agenda. Let's just wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
The next requires an annual report from DFR,
Mhm.
each year for 5 years on the number of firefighters, workers' comp claims, the percentage that were approved, the percentage that are for a type of cancer not listed in the current presumption in the statute,
Mhm.
and the number that were reported to the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer. And then it requires all workers' comp insurers in Vermont, doing business in Vermont to report to DFR. I believe you have the league here, which is one of the main insurers for these fire departments, so they can speak to that. But you may want to also hear from one of the insurance associations. I don't know.
Okay.
There, but that is to get a better snapshot of what's actually happening,
Yeah, we probably have another 2 minutes.
right?
Then we can hear from everybody else.
The next section that's highlighted in yellow on page 20 provides grants to subsidize annual cancer screening. It provides $1 million. I think the estimate was north of $4 million, so this would be just partial
I
subsidy.
think it was more than that, but let's,
Yep.
million is what I think we can even start talking about.
The next section after that on page 21 is correction to the unpaid medical leave statute to bring our definition for a serious illness in line with the federal definition for a serious health condition.
Mhm.
Covers the types of conditions and the types of healthcare providers. And makes us consistent with federal law that's been in effect for 30 years.
All right, let's do it. It's time.
The same with the section after that, it's just technical changes to update the terminology. And then the next section after that is the baby bond trust.
And what
I-
page is that?
That starts on page 24. I will not walk you through that because that is John's bill.
Okay.
And so John and the treasurer's office would be the ones to talk to you about the details of that. And that brings you to the end of the draft.
So John, we can let you go in that, why don't we just schedule half an hour
Deal.
for the treasurer and John to walk us through the baby bond?
Can I just ask if I have consent to speak with them about changes that they proposed in that section? I'm assuming that I do.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've seen an email that says we're good with the final draft, but just
Okay.
review. Okay,
Cool.
thank you, John. Okay, let us go down the list as we go quickly. Susan.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Susan Yoki from Legal Aid.
Okay,
Good morning, good to see you.
thank you so much for letting me testify. on a Very busy Friday. So I'm,
Like every other day.
Susan Garcia Nopi from Vermont Legal Aid. I work with people who collect unemployment and then sometimes later get a notice that they've been overpaid unemployment. And I'm here to talk about the waiver provision of the bill. Time permitting, I also want to share a couple thoughts about the fraud part as well. But the waiver is really for non-fraud overpayments. Non-fraud overpayments can happen if the the employer makes a mistake when reporting information or doesn't, get timely information. because the department's trying, they're supposed to be getting the payments out within certain timeframes. Sometimes the department makes a mistake, we think it's perfect, mistakes happen. Even the Social Security Administration has a waiver process that's the same legal standard as what's proposed here. Because sometimes mistakes happen, and sometimes the claimant makes a mistake. The rules are complicated and confusing, and sometimes people will answer a question a certain way when they file their claim, and they think they understood what that question meant, but legally it meant something else. And so what happens is, weeks, months, sometimes could be a couple of years after they got the benefits, they get a notice saying, now you have to pay it all back. And that money for our clients is long gone, because the unemployment benefit isn't a full wage replacement, so they've already spent that money on rent, groceries, what have you.
So if we could get to, it
Yes.
sounds like there's minor, but maybe critical disagreement with DOL. Can you highlight that and your take on why we would use your language?
Absolutely, and I will say that the two look very close now, because we did have a conversation with
Great.
DOL, and you'll need to speak to them.
Yes.
But we did those changes, we
We
sent
want to hear
you.
both of your takes, but
Sure,
yeah.
and that was why we had asked for rule, they felt a lot of that more blocked in rulemaking, so that's why we had asked to have that in. What Damien mentioned about their technology, the 50% really couldn't go into effect until they have the technological capacity to do that.
When, oh Lord, when?
The original bill had more of an individualized determination as to how much should be withheld, but administratively, they felt that was not feasible. And then we, where we had a disagreement was about collection activities being paused, because what happens now is if someone has an overpayment and then they become unemployed again, they don't get the benefits because the benefits get withheld. And also income tax refunds get, our proposal was that any collection should be stayed until a decision's made about the waiver and all appeal processes are done. But we did, in the proposed language, we did recognize if an appeal has made its way all the way to where it's going to the Vermont Supreme Court, and it's, it's there for all the internal appeals. The Vermont Supreme Court process is long, and that's outside of Labor Department's control. So those were some of the changes. I think the versions, the option 1 and option 2, as you have them now, I think the key difference is option 1 just says that collection would be stayed while the overpayment decision itself becomes final and goes through any appeal process. Our option 2 also says that it will be stayed until a decision's made on the waiver application, and any because if someone can't afford to pay it back and they apply for a waiver, really that should be decided first before the money is taken, because if their benefits are withheld and they are eligible for the waiver, then that money's got to be, that's got to be straightened out afterward, and the person will have been without the funds they need to support themselves at any time. Another difference between the two versions is our version talks about the ability, if someone doesn't qualify for a waiver, if it's not a fraud, they should have the ability to enter into a reasonable repayment arrangement with the department. It's been our experience that the department does do that now as a practice, but it's a really important practice that should be codified. And then our language also makes it clear that the person can request a waiver at any time, because someone might initially, be making payments for an overpayment, but then some life circumstance happens and and then they're not able to do that anymore. And the only other difference I would say between the two, and it's just very technical differences, option 1, or our version says that this state waiver law should apply to any federal federally funded unemployment benefits, including DUA. And we, to the extent applicable by law, restrict that. But unfortunately, I wish DUA benefits could be waived, but federal law itself says they cannot. State law provisions don't apply, so that was why we didn't have that in ours. But the way it's written, it would cover any other federal programs such as pandemic programs.
So what's here is legal. On page 5, little paragraph G, applies to overpayments, right?
Pages are long. Sorry.
So this,
Yes. So to the extent it says it'll apply to any federal program to the extent provided by federal law. So if the federal law allows it, then it would also apply to federal law.
Other question.
Regard to company to collect, in the department's position, won't attempt to recover until the commission has made a final determination and the right to appeal has been exhausted. I think that's what the department thinks. And what you said is, will not attempt to recover until the commissioner has made a final determination and the person's right to appeal has been exhausted, or person files an application for a waiver until the commissioner's made and the person's right to determine the referee or board has been exhausted. So it's not materially different than in terms of what you're asking.
Well, Senator, it is in one respect. I believe the DOL's version is saying when someone first gets that big overpayment notice, like we did because of X, Y, Z, you have to repay $10,000 that we paid you. The DOL version would say collection just until the decision that you are overpaid becomes final through the appeal process.
Oh.
Our version would also say, or if that person, you know, maybe doesn't contest it or they contest it and they lose, but then they say, well, I can't afford to pay it back. I'd like to apply for a waiver. We would say that DOL should, you know, that waiver application should be decided before the any collection happens. Because if it turns out they should be eligible to have it waived.
So it's the commissioner's final determination on the waiver that would apply in your case if one is requested.
Yes, and then their appeal rights just through the insurance appeal process. If they were denied the waiver and thought that was wrong, they could request, you know.
But that is an appeal within the department. It's not
Within the
an appeal
department,
against-
correct.
It's forced discretion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely within the department.
Senator Cummings.
Just so we know, I know what it used to be. What is the standard for payment? It's a percentage of your salary or it's a weekly cap. Does that change?
There really is no standard now for repayment. You'll get an
No,
initial.
for payment. What kind of money are we talking about with weekly payment?
You mean the weekly benefit amount?
Yes.
That somebody could get?
Yeah.
It really depends on their wage history and the wages they had in their base period. There's a minimum and a maximum. I want to say that.
That, I know it used to, I thought it was capped at like $350. It was 2/3 of your salary or $350, whichever was more, but that was a number of years ago in another committee. I'm assuming it's gone up with inflation, but
It is,
I'm assuming it's somewhere around 500.
I think it's higher than that. Maybe Dirk, wait, I want to say it's 700-ish, the
It is in
maximum.
the, I'm sorry, Dirk Anderson, the Department of Labor, no longer as intimately involved in the unemployment insurance program, but I believe the current maximum benefit is in the 700.
Yeah, what, yeah.
Weekly.
A lot of our clients, of course, are not.
Are not there, so it's a portion of your fat salary or whichever is less.
There's a formula that's used and, and it's, I think the wage of labor is around 50-ish% or something, it's never going to be as much as one.
You're not getting your full salary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do need to move on. You can maybe write an email about the fraud piece if you want to.
Certainly,
That would be helpful.
yes, thank you for.
Dirk, I almost want to give you the chance right after, but we have folks we don't have as often. We have you back.
I can send back.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I'm the one that's assistant at People for Labor and you're not prepared to.
You're a permanent labor.
I am.
With Dirk, yes, okay.
We will only be commenting on firefighters report.
Oh, I see. Okay, great.
And so I'm looking at the return and the return next week, my clients return.
That sounds great. Okay, so in case people didn't hear, we're gonna have DOL back in. I think it's better when Cameron's here. We're not voting on the bill today, so. Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to return.
Okay, so if you want to stay for this part.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that leaves two witnesses left, Chris Juby and Michael Skaza. Is it Skaza?
And Joe Damiano.
Oh, I checked him off like wishfully. Okay, I'm not wishfully, but just.
That's fine. Good start. Good start.
Joe, if
Yeah.
you want to get in the witness.
Sure. I'll be pretty because of time anyways, but just, I did submit some written testimony for the record. Joe Damiano, I'm the Director of Risk Management Services at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So in my role, I oversee the two insurance trusts that the LCT offers to its members, like UI, but also the Property and Casualty Intermunicipal Fund, also known as PASSIVE. So I submitted about 6 pages of written testimony. I think you'll find very interesting. a lot of stats. I'm not going through that today. I think the couple things that I just want to cover real quick is give you some stats. We cover 9 career fire departments at Passive just directly, and then 130 volunteer departments we place in the state assigned risk program.
130 volunteers.
130 volunteers.
And that's probably most of them.
That's most of them.
And
Yeah. Nine professional we cover, we hold in-house and cover them directly. So as you'll see, and mostly it's because the way they're rated, it's per 100 payroll, you can't collect enough contribution on volunteers generally for the risk. So we just a few more stats that you go on. The 9 career departments that Passive provides coverage for generate about 1.44 billion in workers' compensation contribution, as we call it, also known as premium, or about 11.5% of the total workers' comp contribution collected by us. And then for volunteers, the assigned risk carriers only collect about 609,000 for the 130 departments, so big difference there.
collect
609,000, so about a total of about 2 million for all of us combined. So between what we cover and what we put in the assigned risk program, we call members, that's the total amount. So 1.44 that we collect for career, and then 600 that gets paid to the assigned risk program. We've had 11 cancer presumption claims since 2008. Not all have been covered because of stuff in the statute, so I'll just keep it at that. 10 of the 11 claims we received were reported from 2016 on, so most of our claims have come in recently. And I just want to share a couple of the claims real quick with you. 2 of our 3 largest workers' comp claims in the history of the Passive have been cancer claims that we've received. One is a pancreatic cancer claim, the other a multiple myeloma claim, with a combined total incurred value of just over 4.6 million for those 2 claims.
Okay.
Very large.
Yeah, I thought it was more like that.
Yeah. And so total though, we paid out 5.2 million so far in
Okay.
cancer claims.
Yeah,
And then we have one that's developing that's probably going to become a very large one as well.
okay.
All right, so, and real quick, I did hear the committee say, does the Passive do anything proactive for the members? We have we're a very big suite of risk management services that we provide. I
Mhm.
won't go through all those are in our testimony, but we work with fire departments very closely, including the Division of Fire Safety on things.
Mhm.
I guess my testimony was built based on what some of the discussions were at. I realized there's a revised bill that came out, amended bill this morning. We have no issues with the studies. We also have no issues with what you're proposing for a grant program for cancer screenings. At this point, like giving money to the Division of Fire Safety for $1 million. And then we obviously support better cancer screenings. They're going to help save lives and keep, cost of claims down over the long term. So we don't have any issues with that. I think if it became a requirement among departments where that extra like $3.5 million came into play, that would be shifted onto our members, then we would probably have some suggestions there and
Okay.
other ways to fund that.
Senator.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. This is very helpful.
Yeah.
Do you offer to all your firefighters smoking cessation programs or help them get connected? Because I assume you are encouraging
So we-
everyone to not be smoking and not, but obviously some of the stuff firefighters are exposed to is unintentionally, they had no idea.
Yeah.
Exposing them to hazards. So that's one question, and the other is, what are we doing to inspect all of the other stuff that we know and has been identified as cancer causing?
Yeah.
What's in their suits and what's in the foam and what's in the air and what's everywhere.
Yeah, so we do not, we have an SDAP, which we offer for free to our members. And so that through that, there's smoking cessation programs they can access through that. We don't currently fund any of that.
Yeah.
And we're not really active in looking at the gear, but what you'll see in my written testimony is we have concerns about gear in general.
Yeah.
Say for small departments not being able to replace it. And if we're talking about prevention here, that is a real issue. It'd be really nice if we could find ways to help our members, fund replacement schedules for gear, because that obviously is a big concern.
Maybe that's a federal
Yeah.
thing. we could-
Yeah. The other thing I just want to bring to your attention real quick, and I'm maybe Derek or someone from Department of Labor can speak more to this. My understanding is there's a federal OSHA standard in rulemaking right now that's going to require testing that's specific to 1582 and FPA 1582. So as that's making its way through, that could be 6 months, a year, 2 years. There will be a requirement for employers with 15 or more employees who are exposed to certain chemicals to provide these screenings anyways. So that is coming at some point. That's a federal thing. I'm not a OSHA specialist, but my understanding is once OSHA adopts something, then OSHA has to either meet or exceed that. And because we're a state plan, that does go down to volunteer departments as well, as municipalities, all in the state plan.
So that's huge.
That's
Could you
huge.
say that again?
Yeah, so there's a OSHA standard right now under the fire brigade standard that's in rulemaking. My understanding is that it's going, once that goes through rulemaking, they're taking public testimony and all that. Once that becomes a standard, it's gonna require employers with 15 or more employees, or I'm sorry, exposures, employees with 15 or more exposures annually to these certain chemicals will have to require cancer screening, provide cancer screening for the employees.
So exposure could mean a trainee.
Could be in training,
Okay.
yeah, and we're saying, yeah, so we're saying volunteer fire departments will fall into that whole career. I'm not an expert on this, one of my staff brought it up to me, I do, encourage you to talk to Department of Labor about that, just because I think that does come into play.
Yeah, and it's
Department of Labor,
actually,
can you remember, we wanted to talk about that.
yeah, and it's actually not, well, it's a lot that would need to be covered.
Yeah.
That's-
Exactly, yeah, there's definitely a big expense on
Volunteer and professional.
everyone, yeah, as long as they're meeting that threshold of 15 or more exposures, which I think most would.
Over a year.
Yeah. And then, so we don't have any issues. And a matter of fact, for Division of Fire Safety, we can actually provide some of the data in your study, I think, so.
That's what I wanted to ask about. Can I
Okay.
okay, yeah, so do you know how many firefighters total we have?
I don't have off the top of my head, we have that. Well,
Okay,
as we
that's what I
cover,
figured.
the amount we
Yeah.
cover,
How's
some
the
we
cover?
don't.
He doesn't cover.
We don't cover
No.
Burlington, South Burlington, and a couple.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but we had a lot of conversations about volunteers, and you all cover volunteers, because that's
Only
an issue
130
that we had.
towns.
130 volunteer departments, yeah.
Yeah.
So you cover
Yeah.
all volunteers?
But not all of them. There's some that are insured elsewhere, yeah. We don't.
Oh,
we
I thought
cover
when you looked
both.
up Burlington, South Burlington.
That's the only
They're
two career,
professional.
those are the only two career
And
professionals.
they probably don't have volunteers, but I would guess you cover most of the
Most of
volunteers,
them,
like the
yeah.
vast
Yeah,
majority.
that vast majority.
So two questions,
Yep,
please.
yep.
Which is really hard for me to only ask
Yeah.
you. You probably saw the list of what we're
Yeah.
asking.
Yep.
Is, if there's anything else that we should ask,
Yep.
please let us
Oh,
know,
yeah.
or if there's any nuances.
Yep.
That would be great. And then does the type of screening that we're looking at make sense?
So as long as we were gonna recommend that you follow 1582, and be a 1582, which you are, I think, in your language, so
Okay.
we're good with that. So is that the right standard? I believe it is. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's what VOSHA and OSHA are tracking too.
Okay,
so.
great.
Just one other thing real quick, before we go, so last year we talked to the House about this, it's a real issue for both, volunteer or firefighters and carriers like ours. The apportionment when a volunteer firefighter or a firefighter works for two departments. So when there's an injury,
Right.
we had one down in the Hartford in Heartland where it was hard to figure out which carrier is responsible for the claim. And so it would be nice if we could clarify that statute. I'm not asking for that today or this session, but certainly something we need to consider.
That's true for all mutual aid
Oh,
calls.
yeah, anything, yeah. So we had a firefighter who's career in Hartford, volunteer in Heartland, diagnosed with cancer. And it was really hard to, then the insurance companies battle out and they have to litigate because there's nothing in statute around who owes what. And so for us, we ended up paying for without prejudice in that case, so the firefighter was taken care of. But there's risk to that too. So it really needs to be in statute, how you apportion those claims, whether it's 50-50 based on the number of calls. We don't have a recommendation. I just wanted to throw that out there and that's my best.
Good.
I probably overspoke.
No, not at all. So it can be shared. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be one or the other. I mean, they could have 3 employees.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How you share that, because obviously they're doing stuff for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris and Michael, would you rather come back or get just a couple minutes?
Whatever you prefer.
So you feel like you have some suggestions on the language or?
I've got a couple quick things. We haven't
Okay.
had a lot of time to do a deep dive into this yet
Okay.
because we just saw it this morning.
Then why don't we have you back next week so that you can feel more confident in that? Chris, then you are our last witness before we go to the floor, unless you have more that you want to share.
So
Because the bells are ringing, Chris.
I hear you. I'll make it very quick, but I would like to come back and do this a little more in depth. So I'm down in Boston and we just had our state and provincial meeting. I gave Magali a bunch of information from UDS, the Grail, the blood tests, along with contacts from Massachusetts. It'd be good to work them into it. There's a lot of confusion. The 1582, real quick, those screenings are the basic American Cancer Society screenings, and they may not find the cancer until stage 3 or 4. The ones that I'm pushing, and if you get Ray Lankin in from UDS, and talk with whoever and get your stuff from the IFF, their screenings are detecting things early on at stage 1 and 2. So I'll leave it at that. I'd like to come back and spend a little more in depth with this and work on getting, you know, those other people that I sent Magali the info on, and I think you can learn a lot of
Me,
insight
that's
on
why,
that.
or remind myself that people asked for more information about the appropriate cancer screening and the cost of that. And Chris has been working with Magali on the best witnesses there. VSEA, we will also have you back in. So people understand the VSEA request is language about PTSD for state workers that are also first responders and on the front lines of emergencies. So VSEA will come back in to talk about it, but that's the other line that we haven't discussed before. Was there like another request that came in for anything else?
There was an additional request from the Department of Labor,
Okay,
for, there it is. The bill is related to work search requirements,
okay,
and clarifying language around work search requirements. It was based off page 672 in the House. And it clarifies that an individual will not meet the work search requirements if they fail to go to an interview for suitable work, or if they provide false or inaccurate information as part of the job search to avoid getting an interview. So that they're basically they're defrauding the work search system and collecting evidence, basically.
okay,
So it probably needs more testimony than that, but that's what it deals with.
Is there, if people have other testimony they want, let me know, let Dawn know.
4 weeks, on other cancer screening, doing that, I'd like to hear from the Department of Health.
Okay.
To make sure that they are
Didn't they-
legitimate and that they are doing what they.
So Department of Health declined. We asked them early on and they declined.
How
Yeah,
could
I
they
didn't know there was.
decline?
I mean, we could subpoena them, but
No.
they said something, they declined, and I don't know, they just they didn't feel like they had expertise.
Okay, they may not.
Yeah, they didn't feel like the experts on the topic, so they declined.
Want to know what we're going to do.
I think Chris is gonna try to find us people who can be clear about the differences between cancer screenings.
Yeah, because if you
Yeah.
got something that
And what
defines
makes
cancer stage 1 or 2, I think the general public will find.
Yeah.
Right.